The Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 231, recorded November 15th, 2019. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today as always is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, before we get started today, I just want to address something really quick. I just want to address it and kind of get it out of the way. We're not going to discuss it on the podcast, but on Thursday, November 14th, there was a school shooting at Saugus High School. That is my alma mater. That's where I went to high school. I'm a graduate of Saugus High School. So, obviously, this had, a bit of an effect on me. And I just kind of wanted to address that up front before we started on the podcast and say to anybody who might be listening who was, a fellow classmate at Saugus at some point or who knows anybody who was affected by this shooting at all, our thoughts are with you. And, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to kind of put that out right in the open at the beginning. And then we're going to jump into the show now. This week, we are going to be talking about Mr. Robot and The Good Place. Big surprise. So we discuss every week. We're going to be talking specifically about episode 406 of Mr. Robot, Not Acceptable, and episode 8 of season 4 of The Good Place, The Funeral to End All Funerals. So let's get started with Mr. Robot, which again uses these air code messages to kind of develop their narrative for the episode around it.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked before about how they not only are they using the air messages, but it almost seems like they structured the whole season around the air messages.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems kind of gimmicky, but they're doing it right. They're kind of getting it right. This time it's kind of the main story, which will be probably the last of the stories we'll actually talk about, which is where the title seems to come from, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just I'm interested every week. If you look ahead at all of the episode titles for this season, which you don't even need to look up the episode titles. All you have to do is look up, computer error messages, and you get all the 400 error messages. So 401, 402, all the way through to 413. Those are the episode titles. So you can see them right there, and it spells out a narrative. I brought this up last week that if you just look at the episode titles alone, you can almost imagine a narrative about what's happening or what's going to happen throughout the season. But let's start talking about the episode. Let's start with how the episode basically started, which is Elliot and Darlene talking. Elliot apologizing to Darlene. This is all coming after last week's basically silent episode.
Mm-hmm. This episode's not silent.
Yeah. Last week's episode started with Darlene saying we don't need to talk, and then ended with Vera saying that it's time we talk. So this is basically the first chance in this episode that Elliot and Darlene are able to, talk to each other.
Right, exactly.
And Elliot apologizes for what's happening. They seem to be kind of reconciling. Darlene seems to be a little at arm's length with Elliot right now.
Yeah.
She still cares about him and she wants him to be okay, and that comes through. But she's, obviously she's not over the way he acted before. So they have their conversation. They work out what they need to be doing with their current plans. Darlene makes sure Elliot has his tracking stuff on his phone because she says, I need to be able to find you. I don't want to lose you again.
Yes.
And then Elliot takes off, and almost immediately we see somebody with a gun to Darlene's head. And that turns out to be Dom.
Yeah, Dom gets a jump on Darlene.
Yes. And so Dom, she gets her, but Elliot's gone. She doesn't end up getting Elliot. She does catch the bit of the conversation where Darlene says that she can track him on the phone. So Dom ends up calling Janice, the taxidermist, her contact with the Dark Army. And, Janice tells her to kill Darlene. Says, well, we have a way to track Elliot, to get to Elliot with the phone. So just go ahead and kill her. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. You can't kill her. Oh, that's perfectly fine. I'll just go murder your family now.
Right. Yeah.
Reiterating Dom's kind of position and reiterating reiterating that Janice really needs to die.
Yeah, the sooner
And
the
I don't
better,
even mean
please.
just because Darlene's family's at risk, because her family's still going to be at risk, even if Janice dies. But man, they're really playing up her arrogance and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
she just needs to, as a character, she needs to die now.
The sooner the better, please.
Yes. Like, her character is good for the show, but like, what's better for the show, it would be that, like, victorious moment of her death.
They should have, like, Leon just show up and cap her.
I totally thought I thought Darlene was going to shoot her in this episode.
I thought so too, but...
Because I was like, oh, that would make total sense. Like, why isn't Darlene just fucking... Like, that would have been, I think, like a kind of a badass moment, is like with Janice saying all that, and then Darlene, who has Dom's gun, because Dom basically forced it into her hand and was telling Darlene to kill her. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but we'll backtrack. I'm like, it would totally make sense that, like, you know, Janice doesn't even think about the situation that Darlene has the gun, and then Darlene raises it and kills, you know, Janice and the Dark Army people that were there. That would have been kind of a little badass moment. But, you know, that's kind of not really what the show's about, so I understand why they didn't do it that way.
Well, also, the Aldersons are not fighters.
Yeah. It's true. It's like the show's a bit of a talkie show. It's not, you know.
Right.
It's not like an action epic or something. So it just doesn't make sense for that kind of situation, for Darlene to suddenly be like a cold-hearted, you know, badass killer or something. It just doesn't work.
Right.
So I know why they didn't do it, but like, I wanted it to happen.
It's not the type of show where characters are gonna act inconsistent because the plot wants them to be inconsistent.
Yeah, or just because, you know, it's what, like, some fans, like me, want, just to kind of satisfy our own frustrations with
Right.
with a evil character that we're just like, come on, squash that fucking character.
We got some nice character interaction between Darlene and Dom, though. Really rehashing what happened at the end of season 3?
Yes.
Okay.
When Dom and Darlene had a bit of a relationship.
Yes.
Very short-lived, but...
Yeah, very short-lived, but...
And that's where we're backtracking. So we have all this stuff going on with Dom and Darlene. Dom's got a gun to Darlene and is basically... She doesn't full out say it until a ways into their scenes that like her family is at risk, but she's like constantly implying that she has no choice and she's got to do this.
Right.
And Darlene's kind of trying to talk her out of it and basically, you know, tell her not to do it and stuff like that. And, you know, Dom tells Darlene to, like, you know, call her brother and tell him to come back. And Darlene's like, I'm not, it's my family. What would you do? And she's like, I am doing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And they get into the whole thing, and Dom's... It's interesting because Dom's frustrated with Darlene in this, where she's like, yes, I've got the gun on you, but I'm forced into the situation because of you. It's your fault that I'm here.
But here's the interesting thing, because, like, Dom at one point pistol whips Darlene and knocks her out.
Knocks her out, yeah.
And Dom, that's the perfect opportunity for Dom to just pull the trigger and do it, and she doesn't. She can't bring herself to do it.
Yeah. And when Darlene does come to, Dom's like saying she's running out of time. She's literally got minutes.
Yeah, she's literally got minutes.
Because Janice said she's
point.
going to be there, like, on the dot, like at, I can't remember the time, but it was something 30.
Something 30, like, I don't know, let's just say 10:30 for sake of...
Yeah.
For sake of conversation, 4:30? Yeah,
10:30 on the dot, you know, and basically, like, she reveals to Darlene that, like, there's literally, like, you know, 5 minutes till then. Something like that, you know? It's like she's run out of time. She basically, she has to kill Darlene. Darlene's like, you know, had before been like, you know, you don't have to do this. Don't do this. You're not a killer. Don't make them, you know, don't let them make you a killer. I can stop this. At this point, Darlene's kind of somewhat given up on that. And she's telling Dom that their relationship did mean something to her, and saying that, you know, I'm saying that not as a tactic to use against you, you know, whatever happens, I want you just to know that.
Right.
And this makes it even harder for Dom, which I don't think was a plot from Darlene to make it harder. I think it's just what's harder because, you know, it means that Dom can let go of some of her hatred of Darlene for what happened in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of makes it, oddly enough, like the counter to the title of the episode. Like I mentioned later on, like one of the stories in the episode ties into the title of this episode, Not Acceptable. Like you could have also titled like the last season's episode where Darlene screwed over Dom. You could have titled that episode Not Acceptable, you know? And this is like kind of the opposite side of that, of like getting out of that situation, like letting Dom be able to drop her anger and frustration in that situation. And for Darlene to kind of alleviate some of her guilt over that situation, for them to have some honesty between them to get past that. But now time's up. So Dom's like kind of grabs Darlene and says, we need to move now. Darlene's like, where are we going? She's like kind of confused on what she's going to do. And then Dom puts the gun in Darlene's hands and holds it to her and says, you have to kill me. It's the only way. She's doing it because she can't kill Darlene and she's in like a nightmare situation. So for Dom, it's not even just that she can't kill Darlene. It's that even if she kills Darlene, she's like in servitude of the Dark Army with her family with a guillotine floating over their necks indefinitely, you know? Pretty much forever. So she's kind of seeing that as an out. She's like, I wanted to kill myself and I couldn't do it.
Right. Well, yeah, Dom's just a mess. She's just, the thing is, like, she breaks down because she's a total mess from everything.
Yeah. And she's holding the gun to herself in Darlene's hands.
She's begging Darlene to shoot her, to kill her.
And Darlene won't do it because, you know, she can't do that.
Well, because Darlene's not a cold-blooded killer like that.
Yeah. So she can't do it. I mean, she's killed before, you know, by accident, really.
Accident, really. But she's never straight out, flat out murdered somebody. Like, she killed somebody.
Even if she was capable of killing like that, I don't think she would have been able to kill Dom like that.
Right.
So, Darlene's saying, I can't do that. What are you talking about? I can't do that. The door opens, and there's Janice with the Dark Army, with some Dark Army operatives.
Yeah, too late.
Yeah.
They ran out of time.
Darlene ends up getting herself out of this, though, because Janice is, like, talking about how she, like, oh, Dom, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. You're too valuable to kill. But it's going to hurt. Like, basically, like, I'm going to kill some of your family for this.
Right.
And in that moment, she puts a gun up to Darlene, and it just seems like, oh, shit, Darlene's dead.
Right.
There's, no real way for her to talk her way out of this.
Because she only needs Darlene's phone, so she doesn't need Darlene. That was the whole thing. Like, as long as Dom has the phone, Darlene is expendable. So she has the gun up to Darlene. It looks like she's going to kill Darlene, but then Darlene reveals that she wiped her phone. Yeah. So she no longer has the coordinates, and now now they have to keep her alive because she knows where Elliot is.
Janice kind of has a funny reaction to that. She's just never unnerved.
Right, she's never unnerved.
She's like, huh? Like, that's like kind of it.
Yeah, kind of it. Oh, what an annoying character.
So, while all of that's going on, while the early parts of that are going on, Elliot's meeting up with somebody at the place it was basically the coffee house that he was at in the first scene of the very first episode of the series. It's that same place that was run by that pedophile. It's now run by somebody else. Elliot's waiting for somebody to meet up with him. We find out that it's Leon, the Dark Army operative Leon, who Elliot was in prison with. They meet up, they exchange some information, or Leon gives him some information, and, makes the comment that, isn't this place kind of familiar or something? Which is just basically there for the fans to go, oh yeah, that's the coffee place from the first episode. Mm-hmm. But then, it's kind of a short scene. It's just I think they put it in there just so they could bring Leon back. And he basically tells Elliot at the end that he's no longer loyal to the Dark Army, that he's only loyal to paper, to money.
Yes.
He's a freelancer now, and he says, don't, hesitate to call me or something.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a trustworthy figure because the Dark Army has more money than Elliot would,
Right, exactly.
But yeah, so Leon no longer a Dark Army operative, now a freelancer. Well, that's happening. We had, in the last week's episode, we had mentioned the final scene was Vera saying to Krista that we need to talk, that bracketed the whole silent episode.
Yes.
So now we have Vera has Krista in her own apartment, in her own place, her house.
Vera's telling the story.
Yeah, a story about a little bitch and a big bully.
Yes.
Krista mistakenly believes that, Vera was the bitch in the story.
Right.
Because that just seems like, someone's telling a story like that, just kind of, it feels like that's the character that the narrator represents in that situation. Basically, the story is about like a little bitch eventually taking down a big bully.
Yeah, he gets a bat and he takes down a big bully. And, he uses it as a metaphor. He tells Krista that she's the bat. She's the bat he's going to use to take down Elliot.
It's funny, though, because when Krista's like, makes the assumption that he was the bitch in the story. He's like, are you calling me a bitch?
Yeah, he's like, are you calling me a bitch?
And you just see, like, the kind of fear shown across her face.
He's asking, like, his henchman, did she call me a bitch? And, like, they're like, yep, she called you a bitch. And, yeah, you can see, like, the fear washing over on her face.
Because Vera's kind of an unpredictable character. You don't know what he's going to do.
Right, exactly.
Vera's says no, you're missing the point of the story. It was just a metaphor. You're the bat. And he tells that part of the story, and then he is asking her to give information on Elliot. And she won't. She's giving only like little bits of information about, social anxiety, things like that. Just kind of like real, and I think Vera says like, you're giving me like the generic brand stuff. Like, where's the name brand material?
Yeah,
where's
yeah.
The real stuff that I'm going to be able to break him with. He's like, I need to break him so thoroughly that I'm the only one who can put him together. He tells the rest of the story, the metaphor that he had told about her being the bat in that situation, in which the little bitch goes to the hospital and is like the only person who visits the bully, and that like nobody else came to see him or something, and he approaches him and the bully's like freaking out. He's thinking that he's gonna be like killed or something, but the little bitch instead like grabs his hand and like, looks him right in the eyes and says, I see you now. And the idea is that like in that moment, like the bully became loyal to the little bitch.
Yes.
So he tells the rest of the story, Once he finishes that, you see there's like a knock on her door.
The point of his story is like, he's like, well, I have to break Elliot.
Yeah, completely, so that he can be the one to put him back together.
Yeah, so he can build him up, and he's like, that's how you own a person.
Yeah. He's like, I don't want to partner with Elliot or something. I want to own him.
Right.
And so I need what's going to be the thing that's going to just completely destroy him so that I can put him back together.
Right.
But then, after he finishes that story, she's still not willing to give information, but there's like a knock on her door, and it's her current boyfriend. And he's at the door, and she's freaking out because, if he finds out that these people are in there with her, they'll kill him. She knows that.
Right, yeah,
and
exactly.
So they're using that against her and basically saying, oh, maybe we should let him in, and everything. And she's freaking out. Eventually, like, after it cuts away to some other scenes and comes back, you see that the boyfriend's he's still outside, but he's not, like, knocking anymore. And the idea is, like, that Krista was able to get them to not let him in. And so what does that mean? Well, obviously that means now she has to give them what they want under threat of killing her boyfriend. And so she reveals, she says, oh, go into my filing cabinet under Elliot. She gives, like, a specific date. I think it's, like, September 15th. 2009, something like that, Can't remember the exact date, or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, and so he says, like, what am I gonna find there? And she says, Mr. Robot.
Right.
So that's, the information about his dissociative identity disorder is what's going to be used against him, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the Krista and Vera story. Moving on, after Elliot left Leon...
Oh yeah, we get the most fucked up story.
This is kind of the big story, and this is where the title, I feel like, really comes from, too.
Right.
Which is, like, we see Elliot, we first see Elliot, he's at a coffee shop. He's getting, like, 2 peppermint, mochas or whatever, and Mr. Robot's talking to him, basically trying to talk him out of doing something. And we know it has to do with Olivia, we just don't know what at the time. And he's like, there's no time, I can't do it, this is the only way I can do this. He shows up at Olivia's house. He offers her the drink. He comes in and he's talking to her, and she drinks the drink. or some of the drink, and then he says, like, this is gonna sound crazy, but I need you to hear me out. And he basically spells out, like, about Project Deus, and talks about, like, who they are and stuff like that, and that it's her client at her bank, and it's going through all stuff, and she's kind of weirded out by all of this. And she's like, how do you know where I work? How do you know this information? And then he starts talking about, I need you to call, like, your boss. And she basically implies, like, well, what's going to make me do that or something? And he says, well, I know that you are on rocky grounds for custody with your kid.
Right, yeah.
And that if you test positive for drugs, you're gonna, or for Oxycontin, you're gonna lose your kid.
And she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I haven't been taking that.
Yeah, she's like, I'm however long clean,
Right.
I'm completely clean. Like, and she's like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
and he looks at her cup.
He looks at her cup. That's so she realizes that he spiked her drink.
Yeah. And so this is just this fucked up moment of him. Now that she's in the situation, she's telling him, you've destroyed my life. She's like, maybe you can kick it and come back from being drugged. She's like, I can't. It's gonna ruin me.
Right.
You've completely destroyed me. And she's arguing this while he's just trying to get her to call her boss. All he needs her boss to do is, like, literally log in. That's
right.
going to activate a hack that he put in.
Right. And the thing is, like, and he's saying, I wouldn't do this except for running out of time. He's trying to rationalize his actions by saying, he needs to because he's in a desperate position.
Yeah. And she,
even though Mr. Robot was telling him, not to cross that line.
Yes. Mr. Robot was saying, this is, like, you can't cross this line, this is horrible, you can't do this, it's too much. He kind of has her screwed at this position. She's gonna, like, do what he wants, but she hasn't done it yet. And she asked to use the bathroom. Like, I don't know about you, but I immediately knew it was gonna happen at that point.
Yeah, I knew what was happening at that point.
Because you remember in the episode where they hooked up, where he had found her Oxycontin and thought that she was an addict.
Right, she had.
And then she revealed that she wasn't an addict anymore, but she kept the bottle with a razor blade in the bottle because it was like a sign if you ever do this again, you might as well just kill yourself.
Yeah, she said if she goes back to Oxy, she would kill herself.
So like, okay, that's Chekhov's razor.
Yeah, that's Chekhov's razor, yeah.
It's in the medicine cabinet.
But this doesn't occur to Elliot.
Yeah, he doesn't consider that. Because he's not fully understanding what he's doing at this point. This is something that Mr. Robot also says in the narrative that, like he's not aware of the line he's crossing. Like, he knows he's going far, but he doesn't realize how far he's going. And so because of that, he's not able to put together, like, how bad the situation is. And so he only finds out when he hears, like, a body dropping sound and coming from the bathroom. And he goes to the bathroom and opens the door, and she's slit both her wrists. She's bleeding all over the place. And he ends up basically saving her, in quotation marks, saving her life. And in their conversation afterward, he finally convinces her to make the phone call, and she does. And he gets what he needs, and he says, I'm gonna be gone or something, and she makes a comment at one point about, like, like, how could you do this or something, and he snaps back at her, like, you had to know who you were getting in bed with when you got this job. You took the job, but you had to know, like, offshore accounts, all these things. You had to know something was fucked up. And she ends up throwing that back on him later, right at the end of their scene, where she says that I might work for monsters, but you are a monster.
Right. And she says you're the worst kind of monster because you're a monster who doesn't even know you're a monster.
Yeah. And so Elliot leaves, and you can see that the contemplation of all of this is starting to, like, go in his head at this point.
Elliot doesn't have a lot of time to think about it, though.
He gets a phone call.
Yeah, he gets a phone call right away.
He gets a phone call from Krista. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Krista, and it's obviously a setup.
Yeah. She's basically saying, basically tells him the truth, that Vera went after her and everything, but then she adds in that, and he let me go, and that's the real clue, that it's an obvious setup, because it's like, there's no way Vera would let her go.
So Elliot decides he's gonna go find Krista, but almost as soon as he decides that, two of Vera's thugs come up and pick him off the street and shove him into the trunk of a car and drive off with him.
See, it's kind of weird because it almost seems unnecessary for the call if that's the case.
Right, yeah.
I think what actually happened there is that there was some time compression that we, as an audience, weren't really privy to.
Right.
That he was actually getting closer to Krista's apartment at that point.
Oh, that could be it, yeah. They could just be compressed time, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't really that well done because it was kind of confusing. And
yeah, because it seems like it happens like 2 seconds after he gets the call. Like, he doesn't look like he really gets anywhere before that happens, which makes you think, what was the point of the call?
There was some narration after the call, and then some shots of him walking and a few cuts and stuff.
You're right, because it does, like, when you're watching, it does look like it happens right after he gets out of Olivia's house, and then you would have to ask, how'd they find him so fast without knowing his location?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, what would be the point of the call? If they could just grab him anyways.
Yeah, if they knew he was there and could grab him, what was the point of the call?
Yeah, so my guess is there was some time compression and he was on his way to her apartment and he had gotten close enough that they saw him and abducted him.
Right. That makes more sense.
and that's it. That's the episode. It was an okay episode. Like, the story between Elliot and Olivia was the real strength.
Yeah, that was the real
of the episode. It was really dark. It was really heavy. It was really well performed.
It was the thing where, like, well, I knew what was going to happen. Like they played it up as like, oh, this is a burgeoning relationship, and I'm like, no, that's gonna go fucky real fast. Yeah, I know that from the jump. I was not wrong.
Besides that, the Dom and Darlene storyline was okay as well. It kind of, like I said, it was kind of almost like a counterpoint to what Elliot was doing. It was like, basically, I feel that the point of that scene, in a way, was to say, even if you do cross the line, there is a way to kind of walk it back a bit, but it takes time and, drastic situations.
The thing, this Vera thing complicates things because, like Elliot's stressed, he's on a tight time schedule.
Yeah.
And
like, literally, that meeting for the Deus group is like that evening.
Yeah, it's that evening. Now he's got to somehow get him out of, like, whatever the fuck Vera's doing.
And you know what we haven't even addressed in, like, weeks?
What?
Is the whole third personality thing.
Oh, yeah, no, we haven't. They're saving that in their back pocket for the right moment.
Yeah, so that's coming up. That's like a little, that's a grenade with the pin pulled and the handle still in place.
You know what? I bet that's going to come out. I bet that's going to come out when Vera tries to manipulate his alter personality.
Yeah.
When Vera tries to break him and poke at Mr. Robot, that's probably going to bring that out. Because we know for a fact, at the end of season 3, when Vera showed up at Elliot's apartment, we know for a fact that Elliot's third personality came out. Because Darlene remembers him, like, Vera coming around and then Elliot just telling Darlene that it was fine. And it was like, and she's like, what do you mean? And Elliot didn't know, Mr. Robot didn't know. The suggestion is there that Vera visited Elliot and Elliot's third personality talked to Vera.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems, yeah.
So that's it. It's something that's gonna come back. We just don't, like that seems to be, a good guess about where it's gonna happen. That, like Vera is going to basically successfully break Elliot with the misinformation that there's two personalities. And instead of getting the result he wants, instead he's gonna wake up the third personality.
Right.
So, multiple personalities, the show.
So, who seems to already be familiar with Vera. So that's going to be interesting to see that play out.
Yeah, definitely. So, that's Mr. Robot. Let's move on now to The Good Place. Let's take a train car to The Good Place. And we're going to be talking about Season 4, Episode 8, The Funeral to End All Funeral. The episode starts with basically where the last episode left off. The trial is, or the test is over. All the new participants, the test subjects are all frozen. And, Eleanor's got her drink and the gate opens up. A little guy shows up and is like, hey, trial's over. I can't give you the results yet, but Michael has to come with me. Michael and Janet, they go check the test results.
No humans can go.
Yeah.
They said. So.
Yeah.
So while they're waiting for the results, Eleanor Eleanor decides that Eleanor and Tahani come up with the idea too. I think Tahani comes up with the idea to have everybody just have like their best funerals.
Yeah.
She decides to throw a funeral for everybody and make it like the best one ever.
It's because Jason was talking about the fact that they'd had so many funerals and that it's just gotten old.
Yeah, Jason. Yeah, because Jason was worrying about the outcome of the vote and saying like, "Oh, I don't want to die again. I died so many times, had so many funerals now. It's just getting old."
Yeah, and Janet offers to tell them kind of, or like to show them their first funerals.
Yes, their original.
But she only gets as far as telling Tahani that, you know, Moby was the first person to speak at her funeral when they cut her off and say, no, they don't want to see that, you know, they don't want any of that. And that's when Tahani comes up with that they should kind of have, like, throw a funeral to get their minds off of it.
Right, yeah. That's
we should mention that they really want to bring Chidi back at this point, but they can't.
They can't. No,
Chidi's frozen until the results are over.
Right. Everybody who were part of the experiment are frozen. And we don't really see the other members of the experiment at this point. It's just Chidi. Everybody else is like not in this episode. But yeah, I love Jason because like Jason talks about his funeral or Janet mentions Jason's funeral and Janet says like Jason's funeral was like his friends just like graffitied a red lobster in his honor.
And he said that's the first, like, stage of grief in Florida.
Yeah, that's the first stage of grief in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and then Eleanor says, like, in Arizona, I understand that in Arizona, like, you're either buried or your body is used for target practice for a $200 tax credit, or...
Yeah. Donate to, like, firing range for target practice for a $200 tax credit.
So we should talk about the funerals. They have their kind of like their ideal locations for each of their funerals, and each one basically has, you know, the person whose funeral is kind of laying there as the other members of the group kind of eulogize them.
Yes.
So Tahani, she's on in a Gulfstream G650 private jet.
Yeah, private jet.
And she's laying down and they're kind of just eulogizing her. Eleanor talks about, you know, like what she's learned from Tahani and Jason makes kind of a poignant comment about Tahani not being treated very well and that people should have been nicer to her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Chidi can't really participate in the conversation because he's still frozen in the bathroom where Janet placed him. But then after that, on that moment after, they decide, you know, we should have Chidi here, even if he's frozen. So they just kind of Weekend at Bernie's him into the rest of the funerals at this point. So they grab him, and so when they're doing like Jason's funeral, he's like on he's like in the pool, like on a pool raft, just floating by like he's casually suntanning or something. And Jason's funeral is at a pool, and he talks about that he was born in a pool when his mom did a cannonball. This is just typical Jason.
Yeah, he was like, she died from the big sea, and then, but he's like, she was eaten by an alligator, and then.
Oh, it was like, that's what we called the crocodile. Big sea.
The big sea, the crocodile. But then he said, no, psych, it was cancer.
Yeah. Sad but funny. That's typical, like, Jason stuff.
Yeah, it's typical Jason stuff, yeah. And like Eleanor was like, Jason is like the one guy she could talk to about like stuff like committing crimes and stuff.
like semi-legal drugs.
Semi-legal
drugs
Statham. And Jason Statham, yeah. And Jason's like, Jason Statham.
He's on Jason Statham forever.
Forever, yes.
They say, okay, what about Eleanor's? And she's like, oh, we don't even have to leave where we are for mine. Mine's easy.
Yes. She's like,
so hers is
hers is in somebody else's bathtub in a house that she broke into.
And not bathtub, it's by the pool, like it's at the bar at a house.
Oh, okay. I thought
that
it was
she wasn't invited to.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Hers is funny because she's got like, there's like a big banner hanging up in the background that just says, "Ya dead?"
Ya dead, yeah.
And she's wearing a t-shirt that says "Dead AF."
Yeah, dead.
There's all sorts of little hidden jokes there too. Like there's a food table at her funeral that has, was it like hot dogs tied to churros with Slim Jims that somebody pointed out. It's like a background detail that you have to like pause the screen and look for. But that's such like a Arizona Eleanor food, isn't it? Like a churro hot dog tied up with a Slim Jim, you know? So she's getting her eulogy. Yeah, Tahani basically is like pretty funny talking about like her, like, oh, you know, Eleanor, she'd either, you know, be putting me in my place or she'd be inappropriately, objectifying me. It's just funny. They always have that, like, the lesbian chemistry between Tahani and, Eleanor. But, yeah, so that was funny. And but Tahani says that Eleanor, like, in those moments, even though it was like Eleanor was like objectifying her, like putting her in her place, that she'd never felt so seen as from Eleanor. So that was kind of like the touching moment from Eleanor's.
Yeah, that was touching.
Also, it should be noted that Chidi in Eleanor's version is wearing the sexy postman outfit.
and then they do a funeral for Chidi.
Yes, it's very brief because it's interrupted, but they basically have him back in the office, just surrounded by books.
Yes.
And Eleanor's gonna say something, but she kind of fails at it. She goes full, what is it? What did she say? She calls him like a rootin' tootin' varmint or something, like.
And she says, sorry, I didn't mean to go full Yosemite Sam.
Yeah. And she says, I can't summarize my feelings for him in just those many words, you know? And she gets to it later. They kind of redeem that later in the episode. But, yeah, they don't really do much in his funeral before they're interrupted by, you know, the gate opening again and them saying that they're ready for the results. So we should go back at this point and talk about what happened throughout the episode with Michael.
Yes.
And Sean and everybody else.
I love Michael and Sean's interactions, of course. Or like, Sean's going to Michael.
And Michael's like, I'm rubber, you're glue thing, but doing it wrong.
You know, yeah, because Michael just goes, well, I'm rubber, you're glue. What you say to me sticks to you. And then he's like, wait, I did that wrong. You didn't say anything yet. Say something insulting. Say something really mean that cuts deep. And then that'll be you because you're glue.
Yeah, there's like frequent examples of Michael trying to get that joke to work or that thing to work and not succeeding.
Yeah. So basically what happens is the judge comes in and the first thing the judge does is suggest that they reboot Ally McBeal.
Yeah, she's like, I need everybody to sign this. And Michael's like reading it and he's like, this is the petition to reboot Ally McBeal. Yeah. And she's all like, why not? They're rebooting everything else. So it's just kind of funny the way they slip that in. But, the judge ends up revealing the results. It's funny also because she had like her assistant. She's like, okay, reveal the results. He's all in 30, 29, 28, like counting down from 30. And they're all just like, oh, come on, just announce it. Basically, everybody but Brent improved.
Yeah, so everybody improved.
Simone seems to improve like the least. Then Chidi, who is already kind of a good person for the most part.
He improved.
And then
John,
the gossip columnist, improved a lot, like 40-something percent.
47%. And then Brent was negative 1%.
Yeah, he actually didn't improve. He actually slid down from where he was at when he died. But so they had those results.
And it seems like it's clear cut. It seems like it's clear because the judge is like, because Sean jumps on that. Sean's like, haha, Brent didn't improve. And the judge is like, well, I can't judge for you based on that because that is like a couple of people improving, and then the other person didn't improve. Like, that's not strong enough evidence for me to rule in your favor. And so Michael tries to play where he's like, Michael points out that he tries to point out how like the people who are involved in like the original subjects, not the new ones, but the original subjects' lives, how their lives improved.
When he brought them back to life or back to Earth for that little bit.
Yeah, when they had brought them back to life, Earth.
That was because of Sean, because Sean actually said something that kind of set that up. Yeah. He had said he's all, it was stupid even when you brought those insect sex back to Earth or something. And he's like, I'm glad you brought that up.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's funny, too, because, like, when Michael brings that up, like, Sean immediately objects, and Sean's like, he doesn't get to get to bring up, like other good people. If he gets to do that, then I get to bring up bad people. Like I forget
Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes.
I have them all written here in the show notes.
Or Henry Kissinger. Or PewDiePie.
Yeah, like, he waits for a while. He says, wait, PewDiePie. Like, is like the ultimate bad person to bring up.
Yeah.
Which is funny. So basically the bad place is saying PewDiePie is the worst person on Earth.
Yeah.
Michael points out, though, that these aren't random people. These are people that were tied to them, and that, there's a benefit in outside influence, like affecting humanity and improving them, and saying that if outside influence can improve them, and then we don't provide outside influence, then how can we, hold it against them that they don't improve? And somewhere in all of this mess, they bring up kind of like where the original people improved, or not the original people, but the current test subjects improved. And they actually point out that Brent did slide from the very beginning, like way low, like to the very bottom of the graph, as far as like as bad as he could be. But that at the very last moment, he improved like drastically, and all the way up to that -1%. That wasn't a tick off at the end. He had slid off way before that and then went all the way back up at that last instant. And that, when you look at the stats on it, it's saying that he felt genuine remorse and for the first time, and was about to express genuine remorse.
Right.
So the idea being that they picked up on him being about to express it, but because he wasn't able to express it in time, he was still at -1.
Brent wasn't -1% worse. He was already worse than that. Like, he improved to -1%.
Yeah. Well, what it was is that he had slid when he was in the good place, but at the very end he improved.
Yeah,
like
at the very
immediately,
end
like at the very, very end.
Yeah.
And recovered basically all the ground that he had lost.
So basically,
and would have gone up even higher if he had had a chance to actually express his remorse.
What Michael does is Michael successfully makes the argument that the point system is broken and it's not working out.
We should say at this point that they've brought in the rest of the, like, Eleanor and not Chidi, but Eleanor,
yes.
Tahani and Jason and Janet have joined them at
They
this
did
point.
bring in Chidi's frozen body.
Yeah. and they brought them in to get the final verdict from the judge.
From the judge. And the judge's final verdict is she agrees with Michael. The point system is broken, and that Michael is correct. Michael wins. And it's like, Michael's like, see? That wasn't so bad. And the judge is like...
Yeah, that wasn't so hard.
Yeah, that wasn't so hard. And, and Sean's got defeated. This defeated look on his face. And then the judge says, as a result, I'm rebooting Earth. And wiping out all the humans on Earth and in heaven. Or in the good place.
And in the afterlife.
The afterlife, yeah. And they're like, what?
So we knew with the test ending so soon in the season that there was going to be another.
Yes, we knew there was going to be another twist. There was going to be a second half to
and now
the
we kind of know what it is. So she's like looking through her drawer, the judge, for her device that she has like a remote control that wipes out humanity. And so she's looking through her device.
I love she's looking through her purse. She has a season 2 of Justified.
Yeah. She has all these little random things, season 2 of Justified. And then she finally, just as she finds it, it disappears out of her hand. And Janet says that, she put it in her void. And she said, like, I'm not gonna let you do that. It's in my void. And then the judge says, well, give it to me or I'll go in and get it. And Janet's like, I'd like to see you try it instantly. She's inside her void.
She's inside her void.
And you just see Janet kind of squirming, going, oh, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then while she was rooting around, she pops back out and she's like like, this isn't funny. Where is it? And Janet's like, well, what do you mean? Like, it was in my void. And then Bad Janet comes out. And she says, no, it's in my void.
Yes. It seems that Michael was able to get through to Bad Janet with his story.
I like that she says that she read it while she was on the toilet.
Yes.
And then she had to clarify. She said, I don't poop because I have to. I poop because I choose to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she says that she's on their side now, which obviously upsets Sean.
Yeah, Michael's like, so you read it. And she's like, yeah, but then I use the pages to wipe my butt.
Yeah, so don't get so full of yourself.
So don't get so full of yourself, yeah.
So then, the judge is like, well, I'll just go into your void and get it, and then I'll marbleize you. And then she says, oh, did I say it was just me? And she opens the door, and it just starts filling up with Janets. A whole bunch of Janets are coming in, including like a great moment with Disco Janet.
Yeah, Disco Janet.
Referenced. Disco Janet had been referenced before, just like as an offhand joke, and then here we get like a whole moment with all the Janets walking out where you see her doing like a little bit of a dance. But then you also see, like, I forget what she's called, like the really boring Janet, and she's got her shoulders slumped the whole time. But yeah, so then the judge is like, well, I'll just go through each and every one of your voids until I find it, and I'll just go through your voids and then marbleize you one by one.
Until I find my remote. And this gives...
That's what we call the ticking clock.
That's what we call a ticking clock. Well, this gives them time to formulate a plan. And I love Michael's, Michael is panicking, so Michael's planning is going, okay, we need to come up with a plan. Okay, first step, come up with a plan. Second step, execute the plan. Okay, this is...
Eleanor ends up saying, like, the solution is to wake up Chidi.
Yeah, wake up.
And in this point, where she didn't eulogize him before, she kind of eulogizes him.
They come to a conclusion that instead of trying to change the point, they need to come up with a new system. Not just the point system. They need to come up with a completely new system. And Eleanor comes to the conclusion that the one person they're best equipped to come up with a new system for deciding, who's moral and who's not, or who gets to be in the good place and the bad place should be Chidi.
Yeah. And she's like, you need to wake up Chidi and you need to restore all of his memories.
And Michael's like, so you don't think it's a bad idea to hand like the fate of the universe to a guy with massive problems with indecision who is going to get 800 years of his memories back all at once?
And she's like, I don't know, but if anybody can do it, it's Chidi.
Right.
And in this, she kind of eulogizes Chidi properly in this moment. As I said, there's kind of like a makeup for the fact that she wasn't able to do it before. She goes on about how great he is at this particular thing, at being like a good person who goes out of his way to help others and to think constantly on ways to help others. So that's Chidi's eulogy, in a sense, and also the end of the episode.
Yes.
So now we kind of know what's going on moving forward for the season. I mean, they said something like it was going to take 45 minutes or something. That's the ticking clock time on it. So again, this isn't going to encompass the rest of the season. This will encompass maybe an episode or two or something, a couple more episodes. So we got more twists coming, but it's cool to kind of get like a perfect moment coming together with like, okay, yeah, it really is. This is the kind of like the perfect position for Chidi. The perfect time to bring Chidi back into loop is for this specific thing, and not just because the trial's over, so now they can give him his memory back, but for an actual purpose.
Yeah, for an actual purpose. So yeah, I like the direction this is going.
Yep. And so that's it for The Good Place and for our shows. So next week, of course, we're going to continue our discussion of both Mr. Robot and The Good Place, as always.
Sounds good.
But before we go, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. We're recording this a little bit early. We're recording this on Friday, November 15th. And today, Dollface came to Hulu. The Man in the High Castle returned to Amazon Prime. Avlu the Yard came to Netflix. And The Club came to Netflix. On Sunday, November 17th, The Crown comes to Netflix. And Ray Donovan returns on Showtime. On Wednesday, November 20th, Mad About You returns as a miniseries on Spectrum. On Thursday, November 21st, Cheat comes to Sundance Now, Mortel to Netflix, and No Activity to CBS All Access. On Friday, November 22nd, The Accident comes to Hulu, The Feed to Amazon Prime, Dolly Parton's Heartstrings, it's an anthology series, comes to Netflix, The Dragon Prince returns to Netflix, High Seas to Netflix, Nobody's Looking to Netflix. Then on Thursday, November 28th, Levius comes to Netflix, Merry Happy Whatever to Netflix, Mytho to Netflix, and Servant to Apple TV+. Servant is the M. Night Shyamalan series. It's like the horror series that a lot of people think the Apple Plus should have launched with, but it didn't. Then on Friday, November 29th, Harley Quinn, the animated series, comes to DC Universe, and La Reina del Sur comes to Netflix. So that's it. Thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best in genre.